Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Pave the Way podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Stan Beecham out of Georgia. And a quick backstory before I introduce Stan, or I have Stan introduce himself. He's the author of one of my all-time favorite books called Elite Minds. And that book actually changed the trajectory of my life. About 4 years ago, I picked up that book and read it on a plane down to Tampa. And ever since I read that book, I've never been the same. And to have him on my show is a true honor. So Stan, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Greg. It's good to be with you, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book. I'm glad it was helpful to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So would you mind kind of giving the listeners a little bit about your background and how you kind of got started in the whole, sports psychology kind of mindset area, because it's such a powerful, niche.
Yeah. Let me see if I can get this video situated here. I'm a psychologist by training, a clinical psychologist. When I finished my degree, I really didn't want to go back into doing clinical work. And I had done earlier, while I was in graduate school, some work with the kickers at the University of Georgia. Vince Dooley was the coach and then was the athletic director in the 90s. And I basically proposed to him the idea of coming and starting a sports psychology program at Georgia. And he agreed to do it kind of on a 1 year kind of trial basis. And of course, we ended up turning that into a full-time thing. And I ended up staying a little over 4 years. And so that was a really interesting, time, and a lot of learning took place. But one of the things I learned in that process is that the things that we're trying to do in sport, primarily at the time of how do you get people to work together as a team and collaborate, to pursue, one common goal. And I had written about that. And, so, business people read the sports page. So DuPont at the time, right outside of Athens, had a big plant. And the guy who ran the DuPont plant called me up and asked me to have lunch with him. And we talked, and he said, I want you to come and work with my managers. And I was like, I don't know anything about business. I'm a psychologist now working with athletes. And he's like, it's the same thing. Human performance is human performance. Everybody's trying to get their people to do their best. And so because of his urging, I started working with these managers out of this big DuPont plant, and end up eventually going back to Atlanta, joining a firm of psychologists that did corporate work, and really kind of left the sport thing. And then some of the kids that I worked with at Georgia as athletes were now coaches, and they would call me up and ask me to work with them. And so that kind of got me back into sport things. So right now, most of my work is with corporations and with business leaders. But I've got a handful of, mostly right now, professional golfers that I work with. I'm trying to retire, but, when somebody calls me up, I have to talk to them just because I'm still interested in it.
Yeah, totally. It's like you want to fire the clients until they're like, hey, Stan, come on, we got to keep doing some work. It's like, all right,
well,
I guess.
Yeah, I enjoy doing the work. It's everybody's trying to solve that same question, which is, how do I get to my best?
Yes.
And if you can help people figure that out really by simplifying it, then you got a chance of helping them out.
Absolutely. So that's very interesting. I know the whole, and it's funny you talk about your book, because Stan wrote a book called Elite Minds, and it's the book that really changed the game for me. We'll talk about that at the end. But, that book, I was reading that book, and I was coming off of a hockey career. So I looked at that book as a way for me to improve my hockey game. And I was coming on the tail end of that career, and it didn't end up working out for me. But I started to realize quickly with your book that, this stuff can be applied right in business. And this is before the second version came out. So it was the original copy. I think it was self-published, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing how the two kind of intermingle there. So Stan, the first thing I really want to cover on this, and this really is part of the first chapter of your book. It's you believe, there's that saying like, 80% is physical, or 80% is mental and 20% is physical. But I know in the book you believe 100% of everything is mental. So I'd like you to try to elaborate on that for our listeners, to really ingrain that into them, because it's so powerful.
Well, it's actually a biological, physiological argument, which is without your brain, your body does nothing, right?
Yeah.
Your brain is essentially the control center. So if you damage your brain, or you damage your central nervous system, your spinal cord, your body doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the point I was making is that from a physiological standpoint, your brain controls it. So obviously, most of us don't have any brain damage, right? Our brain's working, our spinal cord's working.
Yeah.
So then it really is the functioning of the brain. And the question becomes is, what is the mental state you want to be in that allows you to do your best? And the reality is it's a pretty quiet mind, right? I mean, we know that when our mind's really busy, we're worried, we're preoccupied, it becomes a distraction. So for most people, not only are they not using their mind to help them, but their mind is actually hindering them.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for most people, if you could get them to just stop thinking and just do the activity, their performance will go up significantly. But obviously that's not very feasible. So part of what you try to do is teach people how to manage their own mind, their own thought process. And a lot of it, gets into really helping people understand what is it that they believe about their own success. In other words, what do I have to do to be successful? I'm giving a big presentation tomorrow in New York and to business people. And what I'm talking to them about is, business people really like to focus on results or outcomes.
Yes.
Because they're easy to measure.
Yes.
Right. And everybody in business wants to make more money, just like everybody in sports wants to win more.
Yes.
But the people who really have kind of cracked the code and are performing at the highest level, guys like Nick Saban right now, they'll talk about it's the process. We don't focus on winning and losing. We don't play to the scoreboard. We're not trying to beat you. We're just trying to do our best. So really what we're all trying to do is how do I do the best that I can do? And what's frustrating to most people is they realize that they rarely function at their best, right? And that's really what people want to do. It's not better. We get obsessed with doing better. What you really want to do is just do what you're capable of doing. And the reality is what's stopping me from being my best is me. It's not you. It's not an external situation.
Yes.
They're the excuses that most people give, right? I could have done better. I could have done my best if such and such would have happened.
Yeah. I call them butters. Yeah, but this wasn't that. That wasn't that. And they just keep blaming themselves. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, would you say?
Yeah. And so most people don't understand that, the problem is internal. It's not external.
Absolutely. Totally. I couldn't agree with you more because every time, I get into a jam or I hear someone talking about something, it's always like they blame the outside world. You got to really look inward because when you can change the internal, then the external becomes, you're basically a reflection of your internal beliefs and everything. So it's funny. Before I transition, in the book, you talk about every day that you do your best or you think you do your best, put a W on the calendar. So I want to show you something real quick. I've been doing this for 3 years now. If you can see that real quick, there's W's on the calendar. So there's that one tip you said in the book, put the W there if you did your best. And I've been doing that for years.
So winning the day is really simply, what your mantra should be, whatever day it is or whatever situation that you're in, just ask yourself this question: what's the best that I can do right now? And sometimes the answer is nothing, right? I mean, sometimes the best you can do is just let it be.
That's it.
Which is hard for a lot of us to do. And so, the rest of that message is so try to make today a successful day or a win, right? And try to string as many of those together as you can. But the other part is you shouldn't have this expectation that you're going to, that every day is going to go your way or be a win. You got to understand that, at least 1 out of 10 is not going to go your way, and probably more than that. And I would say if you're winning 7 out of 10, you're probably, one of the best at what you do. So we have this real distorted belief about what we must do to be successful or live, happy and engaging lives. And it's not being great all the time. I think that's one of the, this obsession that you see people have with perfectionism.
Yeah.
Where they can't tolerate the fluctuations in their day-to-day, or they can't tolerate their own consistencies in thought and behavior. I mean, that mindset will just kill you because you're an animal, you're a human being, you're not a robot. And so you have good days and bad days. But even when you're having a bad day, you can still do the best that you can do in that situation, which sometimes might just simply be getting out of bed and getting dressed,
Yeah. That's so true. And it's so good that we're talking about this because I think, like you said, a lot of people now, especially nowadays, like they see other people, they see social media, they see the internet, and they see, it feels like, oh, everyone's perfect, or it's my fault. And then like when they have a bad day, like you said, they think the sky is falling. And it's like when they can just embrace that that's part of the process. And like you said, you know, do something about it, just do something that's controllable. And sometimes it's, you know, it's just, you know, it's maybe making one phone call, or it's
Yeah.
getting out of the situation. And then
Yeah.
that builds momentum, you know, and you can embrace, like when you go into a situation, there's going to be some good days, there's going to be some bad days. When we
Yeah.
have the bad days, there's going to be better days. When we have the good days, we're going to have to prepare for the, you know, the bad days ahead. And it's just that
Yeah.
mindset is so key.
I mean, really what we should all be interested in getting good at is learning how to struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, when things aren't going well and you're having a bad day, can you grind it out? You know, can you get to the end, you know, without being totally defeated by it? I mean, the other way of thinking about it is I think most people, they fundamentally want their life to be easy. They want it to go well, but
Yeah.
you don't. You really don't want an easy life, because if your life becomes easy and everything just comes to you, you're going to get bored with your own life.
Yeah.
And when you're bored with your own life, I mean, that's essentially what depression is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is I want my life to be unpredictable, and I want it to be challenging, and I want a curveball thrown at my head every now and then, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm living that way and I'm learning how to deal with that and tolerate it, then I have a full life.
That's so important. That's so key. And it's a different way to look at things, because I think everyone, it's like, you see a lot of people, they feel like they're chasing something. They're chasing the perfection. And that's what really, that's a big part of
Yeah.
that. Really.
Yeah, they're pursuing things that don't actually are going to allow you to be successful
Exactly.
or
It's like that.
content or happy or, you know, have meaning and purpose, whatever it is that you're chasing. You know, I just think there's so much misinformation about, you know, what a great life looks like.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is it's really learning how to struggle well. You know, it's learning how to move towards things that are difficult and challenging or hard, and wanting to do difficult and challenging things.
Absolutely.
So if I do a lot of things that are difficult and challenging, that means I'm going to fail more, right?
Absolutely.
I'll say this to athletes. You know, I worked with college athletes for many years, and, you know, a lot of times I'll be working with an athlete and they're really not doing well. And I, you know, say, you know, what is it you want? And they go, well, I just, you know, I want to win. I want to have success. And I said, well, you know, why did you play Division I ball? Why didn't you play Division II or Division III? You could have been the best kid on your team and you could, you know, beat everybody you ever played, but you didn't choose that. You know, when I was at Georgia, you know, it's like if, you know, if you came to most of the sports there, you came to play because they were one of the better teams in the country, you know, which is a good choice. So if you choose to go to a good team with a bunch of good athletes, you know, chances are you're not going to be the star. But what I'm saying is, but that was a good choice. And remind yourself that most of the situations that you find you're in, especially when you're getting your head beat in, if you trace it back far enough, you'll realize that you actually chose that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
sometimes you stood in line and paid money for it.
Absolutely. You
You know?
choose your struggle.
And then
Totally.
you complain about it.
Yeah. You're like, what do I get myself into? No, that's such a different way to think, and it's so counterintuitive. I think once people, especially a lot of people that listen to my show, they're business people, and they just want the easy situations. They want the layup deals. They want the lay down.
But you don't
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah. They think they do. They think they want that.
You'll get, if you do that, if that happens over and over again, you're going to get bored.
Exactly.
And then you're going to get sloppy, you know?
Yep.
And you're going to get complacent and you're going to quit growing.
Yep. That's it. The growth is in the uncomfort. So before we get into the fear topic, that's the second thing I want to cover. There's something in the book that you talk about. And when I read this, I'm not kidding. I shared it with so many people. I said, you have a chapter in your book where I believe you went to Italy, and basically the cliff notes is first do what's necessary. Then when you keep doing what's necessary, you can then do what's possible. And when you keep doing what's possible over and over again, you'll look back and you'll see yourself doing the impossible. So would you be able to elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think if people can adopt that, it's huge.
It's actually a quote attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. And I got interested in him primarily because, you know, he lived in he did most of his work in the early 1200s, 13th century. And what was interesting about Francis was He was a man who had no power, prestige, or money, even though he grew up a rich kid. He gave all of it up and chose to be poor. And during a time when the Catholic Church had a tremendous amount of power in Europe, historians really see him as the most influential person of his century.
Wow.
More influential than the Pope, more influential than the kings and the people that were really, the rulers, if you will, the people with power and authority. And so what became interesting to me is how is a guy who has no money, no things, no power, prestige, or position, how does that guy end up being the most influential man of his century, right?
Yeah.
And really what he did is he in the same thing that like a Nelson Mandela did or MLK, he called attention to things, right? He changed people's consciousness. And so he was basically asked, how he built this religious order, which at the time was not called the Franciscans. It was called the Brother Minor. And in order to join his club, in order to join this monastic group, you essentially had to give everything away and agree to live in poverty, which is a pretty hard sell, right?
Yeah.
But he did. And so he basically said, every day get up and do what you have to do. Right. So essentially your chores, right? Get up, brush your teeth, get dressed, eat breakfast, feed the dog, do the stuff that you have to do. But get really good at that. Like learn how to master the basics, the fundamentals of life. And then after you do the necessary or the have to, then just simply do what you're capable of doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're running 4 miles, but you're capable of running 5, well, then run 5 miles, if you've finished doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do at work, but there's a couple more little things that you could do that because you can, right? That's to do the possible.
Sure.
And what he said is, if you will just do what you're capable of doing, what will happen is things that you previously believe are impossible, you begin to do them. So in other words, we grow and develop ourselves by doing what we're capable of doing. In other words, you don't do the impossible by trying to do the impossible.
Yeah.
You do the impossible by doing the possible. In other words, you expand in your own mind what you think you can do. Because the way human beings are, you're not going to attempt to do something if you don't think you can do it, right?
Yeah.
So we only pursue things that we think we can do. But the flip side of that is the fact of the matter is you don't know what you're capable of doing.
Exactly.
So given the fact that I don't know what I'm capable of doing, now what do? I say just admit to myself that I don't know what I'm capable of doing.
That's so powerful. So just do and it's funny. I'll give everyone an example. It's like to tie this into business on what Stan just said. When I started out, I wanted to be a successful, real estate property buyer. And in the beginning, it was do what's necessary, figure out what I'm going to look to purchase, get the financing figured out. And then every day do what's possible. Make a couple phone calls, send some letters out. Next thing you know, make a couple offers. Now, I'm buying 6 properties a month 4 years later. And it's like, oh my God, if you were going to tell me in the beginning, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be like, that's crazy. But every day, and this is like proof of his book, like I just kept doing what was possible every day. And then it's amazing what you can do. So Stan, that chapter alone was great. So as we wrap the show up, I want to end on one thing that I think is, at least for me, and I think for most people, it's the one thing that we almost know it's holding us back, but we don't acknowledge it, and it's fear. And you have that one chapter on fear that is just fantastic. So what is fear, and why do you think it holds so many people back, not only in business, but in all areas of their life? And I think it's one of the most, unaddressed things that people don't want to talk about.
Well, fear is necessary because it keeps us alive, right? So if you look at the human brain, what it's really designed is for survival. The brain is designed for survival. It's not designed for greatness, okay? Your brain just wants to keep you alive. And the way it does that is through this concept called the emotional triad, right? Which is you avoid pain, you move towards things that are pleasurable, and you expend the least amount of energy possible. That's the emotional triad, okay? And it's great for survival. Yeah. So the fact that, hundreds of years ago, you see a wild animal, a lion, a tiger, a bear, whatever, you would have a sympathetic nervous system response or a fear response where you would release adrenaline, and that would help you run away or fight and stay alive. So there was a point in time where we lived in a world where there are actually real things to be afraid of. Okay.
Yes.
The problem now is we live in a world where there's very little to be afraid of. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, if you watch the news, they will fabricate that.
Yeah.
But most people that they don't really have anything to be afraid of, but they're very anxious. And this because you're fabricating. Essentially what you're doing is you're misinterpreting something as being a threat to you that's not. In other words, you're creating the fear internally by misinterpreting your environment or your situation. Okay.
Interesting.
But the problem is once your mind tricks you into it, your body reacts as if it's a real threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Huh.
So all I'm saying is that for most of us, we've learned how to make ourselves afraid. I mean, we don't use that word. We talk about being anxious or stressed or concerned or worried. Those are all of our grown-up words for fear. Okay. But even if you talk to a person who has a lot of anxiety, and what I'll say to them is I'll say, Greg, how are you doing right now, right this moment? And you say, I'm fine, right? I'm okay.
I'm good. Yeah.
So the other thing about fear is it's a future, or anxiety is a future-based concept. In other words, most people are anxious not about what's happening right now. The anxiety is that something's going to happen in the future and I'm not going to be able to manage it.
Yeah.
But since no one knows the future, we all think about the future. We all plan for the future. We all have thoughts about the future. If my thoughts about the future is something bad's going to happen, then I walk around anxious. If my thought about the future is it's going to be good, then I'm not. But either way, it's a made up story. See, this is the thing about it. Your future is a fictitious story that you made up, and then you act as if it's real. I mean, it's the greatest con game of all times.
Crazy. And it's your brain playing tricks.
Yes. I mean, like when people, I use the example of a little kid, little kids have a nightmare, or they're trying to go to bed and they think a monster's in the room, right? And they really are upset and crying, and the parent comes in there and you turn the lights on and you go, honey, what's wrong? The kid says, there's a monster in my bed, right? So you're a good parent. You get down on your knees, you look under the bed, you go, no, there's not a monster in the bed. Well, it's in the closet now, right? Yeah. So you open up the closet, no monster. Well, it's behind the curtain. So you do the whole tour of the room.
Yes.
The question is, where is the monster?
It's in the guy's head.
It's in the kid's head. Who made the monster?
The kid.
The kid did. And we do a grown-up version of that, some of us every day. We make up a scary monster, and then we play along and we pretend as if it's real.
That's amazing.
And it has a huge negative impact on our lives.
Yeah.
I would say probably the
biggest thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest problem that most people have is anxiety or fear, and it becomes toxic, and it impedes your body's ability to recover from illness, and we die from it.
Yeah. No, it's so powerful. And do you think, I'm a big fan of like the 80-20 principle. So if we got to take all the concepts in your book, and I'm sure people are going to be, looking into this book and buying it after this interview with what we've been discussing, would you say, the 20% of things to really focus on that are going to get you 80% of your results do you think fear is one of the 20% of things that people need to identify and address?
Well, I think when you find yourself anxious, right, you need to really dig into what am I anxious about?
Yeah.
Like when I'm kind of perseverating or going over something negative in my head, let's say I'm driving down the road, which is usually when it is. Here's what I say to myself. I go, Stan, of all the things that you could be thinking about, isn't it interesting that you picked this one? In other words, if you can understand that your thought is a choice, it's an unconscious choice, but you want to make the unconscious choice a conscious choice. I mean, this is the essence of psychotherapy, right? I mean, this was, if Freud had a great contribution, and he did, I'd say the greatest one is that he introduced this concept of the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
There's stuff that's going on in your head and you're not aware of it.
Yep.
And through therapy, you make the unconscious conscious, and now you can, it'd be like you're in a dark room and you can't see anything, but you turn the light on, you can. That's the same process of going unconscious to conscious. And so really what you want to do is you don't really want to try to change it or fix it. You just want to become aware of it and speak truth to it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's so powerful. And I think and I'm very glad, like, your book kind of takes all these concepts and it really breaks them down to where anybody can really understand it. Cause that's like the first
Yeah.
book I ever read. I remember you're talking about the subconscious and the conscious mind, and I'm reading this like, oh my God, like, it's almost like I've never heard of any of this before, but it kind of makes sense. And then the more I
Yeah.
got familiar with it and I
Yeah.
applied it, it was a game
I
changer.
taught psychology 101 in college a couple of times, you know.
Yeah.
And even now when I work with, you know, corporate executives, I try to make things as simple as possible.
That's
You
it.
know, a lot of consultants, they charge you a lot of money, so they got to make it fancy, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
My whole deal is this is a very simple process. And there's no need to take something that's simple and make it difficult so that we can feel that we're smart, right?
Yep.
All of this, I mean, this whole process of achieving what you want, being successful, living a meaningful life, it's a simple process that's difficult to do because the difficulty is in the repetition. See, the problem is that we don't want to go through the same process day after day after day. But
Yep.
I think people who are successful, you know, they go to bed at the same time, they get up at the same time. You know, you get, you know, these successful guys that they eat lunch at their desk and they eat the same sandwich
Yep.
every day. And you go, how do you do this?
Yep. That's it. What do they say? They're
They,
brilliant at the basics, right?
yeah, but they simplify their life. They don't make it any more difficult.
That's amazing.
You
It's
know,
true.
they say no to things that, you know, don't enhance their life and don't have meaning for them.
That's
You
it.
know?
And they're very clear on what they want. You know, they're very driven and they have that purpose. And like when they
Yeah,
can build life around
yeah,
that, it just make,
yeah.
you know, a lot of those other things easier. So
You
Stan,
want
this
to
is,
get, you want to get to a point where you got, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 things that you really care deeply about. And then the rest of it, you're just kind of ambivalent, you know?
yeah, go deep, not wide, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Stan, this has been one of my favorite interviews so far. It's so
Well,
fascinating talking about the mind. So, I mean, if people were interested in, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people were interested in finding out a little bit more about maybe your services, what you offer, maybe a
yeah.
website, and then we'll just direct them to the best way they can pick up the book if they're interested. The book's called
Yeah.
Elite Mind. So what are the
Yeah.
best ways?
The best way to get the book is just go to Amazon and get it. They have the best prices.
Oh, they
Um,
always.
yeah. So just, you can go to Amazon and get it. I have a website. It's Dr. Stan Beecham, BEECHAM.com. If you want to track me down. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll put the book link in the show notes and your website in the show notes. And Stan, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm sure
You're
this is going to
welcome.
be a top podcast episode. And I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Greg.
Bye.